we're going to talk a lot more in the future about healthy buildings, right? People are going to want windows. People are going to want lights. People are going to want healthy working conditions. They're going to want a lot more fresh air going into the building.
As the crow flies on the Vance Crowe podcast.
Dan Dokovic, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So you are in commercial real estate, and this is the topic going on right now, not just in the United States, but all over the world, because everyone is wondering when the quarantines are lifted, will people return to the office space? Will the offices be filled again? As a commercial real estate broker, what do you think?
So the offices are definitely going to be filled again. I think there's a lot of chatter out there that office space is going to die. But I think you can already start seeing it. I'm in my office today, and I pulled into the garage, and the garage is already starting to get filled up. And this is the first week after we lifted the quarantine. So I think there's two trains of thoughts. There's certain things that can be done really well from home. Head down work. If you don't have kids like me, some of the more concentrated work can be done really well from home. But when you're talking about what's going to be happening in the offices, it's the same thing that's been happening in the offices for a long time. It's the creativity, it's the connection, it's the teamwork. So, if you look at, well, who are the companies who are going to be bringing back people into the office? It's the companies that are creating stuff. It's the companies that are building teams. It's the companies that are trying to, advance whatever they're trying to do, their creativity or whatever. So I think you've seen a lot of tech companies saying, well, our tech people can work from home. That is correct. But again, if you look at it from the perspective of, are those teams going to be as successful and productive as before? I would say probably not, because we have tried this over and over and over again, and it did not work. Yahoo tried it in 2000s. IBM tried it. Best Buy tried it, and everybody keeps coming back to, you need that personal close connection. So.
Yeah, I mean, and the tech workers are something altogether different, because when you're working on tech and you're working on code, there really is just you and the music that you're playing into the computer. So I have several friends that they have either spent a lot of money or they have built their own white noise machines. They go into the office, and the act of being around other people is actually a sacrifice for them. So for many coders, the idea of working from home means I can go into my dark basement, I can type on this computer, and when I need to share code or I need to communicate, I can do it in a channel where my skills are best used in a written format. Whereas when you're talking about like creatives work, it'd be really difficult to design a movie this way, because like Pixar, when Steve Jobs did that, he intentionally placed the bathrooms in a place where people would have to walk from the entire length of the building in order to come to the same bathroom, but it created those serendipitous collisions where you have a conversation and it jars some new idea. And any of the work that required that kind of serendipitous collisions, that's going to have to be back in an office in some way.
It is. And I think people are yearning to be back in the office too. I don't know about a lot of your listeners, but I think what's happening is, first of all, people as people are social human beings. Let's put a couple of introverts out there, that to the side. But again, people in general like to be around people and feed off other people's energy. And I think that's, I've been on my soapbox because of this. I think what's going on is there's going to be a huge problem with mental health because of this quarantine. People have been stuck at home. They haven't been able to see their friends. They haven't been able to see their coworkers. They haven't been able to have meaningful conversations other than through Zoom, which I think is fine. But again, when you're there in flesh in front of somebody, it's a different conversation than it is when you're over a Zoom or over a camera or over chat or email or whatever. So I was just reading yesterday, the prescriptions for antidepressant drugs went up 34% in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not blaming it all on not being in the office, but I am blaming it on being cooped up inside of the home. And, most of us spend a lot of time in the office, and most of us have, almost office families, right? You have your office coworker families that you almost need as much as you need your day-to-day family, So I think that's a big importance of what office brings to
The antidepressant
well.
thing, like I didn't know that, but it makes a ton of sense to me. When the lockdowns first happened in St. Louis, all of a sudden you saw an explosion of people walking and biking and taking their kids out, and you saw this almost like a resurgence where you looked around and it felt refreshing and good because the community was coming together. But 2 months in, I now can go for a jog at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. at a reasonably late time for me and see almost no runners. And in the evening, I see almost no walkers. So it's like we went back to the pre-coronavirus engagement outside. And then you also don't have the going outside to get in your car and then drive to the office. I would imagine that this is a compounding problem, that if they aren't solving it with exercise, they are going to go on medication.
Well, and you brought up a great point there. When you work in an office space and you're going from an office home, most of us have at least a 10, 15-minute drive home. Most of us take that time to decompress. A lot of people put on music. Some people listen to podcasts. But it is time that you take to decompress and kind of, bundle up your workday, throw it away, and then you get home and you see a family. But again, these last couple of months, for me, I would go down to the basement. Next thing you know is the day's done. I will come back up and it will be an automatic shock to your system, because it's not easy to switch from business stance to being a family man right away, because it's two different worlds. I had a funny conversation with people that cuss a lot, and when they're home, they don't cuss. When they're at work, they throw in a couple of cuss words, right? So then you have that family connection and that work connection combining when they're home working. The kids are like, Dad or Mom, what is that? And people tell me, well, they would typically not see this from me, but because I'm at home, now this stuff is coming out. So it's interesting how you can pick up on certain things because you were working at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, all the world is a stage, and the work stage that we go to, that we put on our costume and we go and we play a role that it's expected, and we know what's going on. We know that if we're making forward progress, like we took the play that is everyone's lives and we said, like, nope, though it's no longer needed. Now you're only acting through this TV screen. So some people weren't putting on pants. Like, I don't know if you heard that funny statistic where they were saying shirts are going through the roof at Target and Walmart and these places, but pants are, not all that important. I think that this is, I, for one, tried to keep my schedule like laid down in stone, because if I were to get into the vortex of I'm not a part of this, routine, I that would have led inevitably to depression for me, bad places.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have been trying to incorporate putting certain things of normality back into their life. So putting on a nice shirt and pants and going and sitting down and working, I've seen a couple of people do that just because mentally they feel much better about it. They don't feel like they woke up, put on their sweatpants, and next thing you know, they're working. And again, if you look at it, when does working from home work? And this is a study that has been done. The working from home works for achievers, right? So if you look at it, okay, so if you have an achiever, they're really good at working from home. but they're also really good working from work, right? I mean, that's the big difference. If you have an underachiever, well, they're now good working from work or from home, and then you're really in a dizzy. So, like I said, some of these people, and like you were saying, in the morning they wake up on time, they go work out, do whatever, put on their clothes, they shut themselves down, and then they're working, right? They get their mind right to work. But again, you can't expect that from everybody, and then, a lot of people, I know there's a lot of young families that have young kids, they're not in school, they're running around home. We have families where there's, two working parents and kids at home. It would be almost a crime to say, well, you should have the same productivity as you were before, because it's not possible. I mean, everybody knows that, everybody knows if you have a small child, toddler, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old at home, they're going to want your attention all the time. And, you're going to have to manage work secondly, right? It's not going to be your number one priority, because you want to make sure that your kids stay safe, they don't walk out in the street or who knows what, right? So I believe that, I've saw some statistics that productivity went down about 8% in the United States, 9% in Europe. But I also have a feeling that that's a kind of a, cop-out number. I think the productivity probably has gone down a lot more than that. It's just that we don't know it, right?
So you're in commercial real estate. What is the state of real estate right now? Are people buying and selling? Are they holding? What's going on?
Well, so it's kind of an interesting time, right? You look at different classes of real estate, right? You look at retail, you look at office, and you look at industrial, and you also look at hospitality and multifamily. All of those assets have their own quirks that come with this. And a lot of people, if you look at it, a lot of people nobody was ready for this. Even if you were in a previous recession, you would know what to do. But this recession is not the same as the previous one, right? This one came in so hot and really took us all by surprise. So if you look at it, obviously the hospitality people have been hurt the most. And you can, I just read an article in St. Louis Business Journal, some are arguing that it's going to take until 2024 to get the hospitality back to the same place where it was in 2019. So, you're going to see huge vacancies in hotels. They're going to be struggling for a long time. So that's kind of on the hospitality side. Retail side, same way. This has been so hard for the retail side, because nobody was going anywhere and the restaurants had to shut down, right? So you can already see right now, a ton of restaurants are already saying, well, you know what? We're just not going to open our doors anymore. And I think that's going to be huge impact on retail real estate.
Because again, for restaurants, it's a really difficult investment, because you can't just be like, well, let's open it up and see if 50% capacity does it for us. You've got to buy milk and eggs and cheese and bread and all these things. And if you don't sell it, then you now have taken on all that liability. And if somebody comes to your restaurant and you don't have the things that made it the reason that they came, maybe they'll be forgiving and maybe they won't. But you can imagine that this is going to really wipe out a lot of people. And they're probably sitting there wondering, should I throw the dice this week? What happens if we, pull back? Maybe I should throw them next week. And it makes it hard to know how to navigate.
Well, restaurant, and this as anybody else out there, restaurants are such a tough business to begin with. In good times, they're a very tough business. And so in bad times, it's horrible. So you look at a restaurant and they're doing, well in a good time, and they're doing well when you have 100% of the tables working, right? But now imagine taking 50, 75% of those tables and putting, I saw somewhere, they were showing a picture, there were mannequins and the tables that were not being used. So it looks like there's people, but they were getting a little creative. But imagine, so now you're down 50, 75%. It's very hard to make it work. Now, some of the people have adapted to that, and they're doing all, the curbside, and they're selling groceries. And, I've enjoyed some of those restaurants that have done that. I'm a big proponent of St. Louis restaurants. So I was out and about all the time, trying to figure out how to order from restaurants and what to do to try to support them. And in the meantime, I was eating better myself than I was before quarantine. It's almost become kind of and I'm a proponent of this. You create this local economy where you can collaborate and you can work with the restaurants. They can provide you some of this local produce, and they can provide you some of this local, much, much better quality food at a fraction of the price, because they don't have to, involve a server. They don't have to involve, and it's going to be to see what's going to happen with the rents. We can pick that up soon too. But again, you can create almost kind of a small local economy, where you're not so reliant on meat coming in from, New York or Wisconsin, on eggs coming in from who knows where, and you can keep the local economy going by doing so. So
yeah, the local economy. I heard a guy the other day, was the former president of Coinbase, the cryptocurrency trading site, and then also a guy named Eric Weinstein, and they were talking about red and green zones and about how different communities were going to be rated based on how likely are you to be infected there. And when they were first talking about it, I was doing some outside work and I was like, this is a joke. These guys are just being fear mongers. And then they said something that really caught my attention. They said, look, the mortality rates, it's not getting 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. This is not the problem. The problem is you're going to eventually hit a point where hugging a stranger or shaking hands could be a $10,000 decision that you're making because you yourself will not be able to work. So if you've relocated your staff because California has all kinds of problems, or New York, those people are going to choose a place where the odds that they're going to have a $10,000 bad handshake are down as low as possible. And that really made me be like, all right, what are the measures that a city could do? Not if they were trying to do security theater, but what actually would bring down your number or make it so you got characterized in that green zone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, if you look at it strategically, right? And if you look at it where we had the most problem with coronavirus, right? You're looking at very dense urban settings, right? So from commercial real estate perspective, even in New York, you saw that flight, right? As soon as Corona came, people were throwing money to try to go to the suburbs, or, it was famously that people were overbidding by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in Hamptons to be able to rent a house, just not to be on top of each other, right? So from that perspective, I think what we are going to see is we're going to see a resurgence of the suburbs, right? Up until this point, people were moving into the cities and they were stacking right on top of each other. Everybody was talking about millennials and how millennials are city dwellers and whatever. Well, yes, but let's think about it. If you can get everything that you get in a city in a suburb, right, and you can have a better quality of life, a house, a yard, you don't have to be on top of your neighbor, especially if this virus thing continues to repeat. Maybe it's not Corona, but maybe it's something else. You got to think about it. I think people are going to be a lot more sensitive about it in the future because they went through this right now. They're going to be a lot more sensitive, like you said, who they hug, who are they affiliated with, where do they live? Because imagine, all of us here in St. Louis are pretty damn lucky right now, actually, right? I mean, we've had the luxury of living in a larger house, right? We have had the luxury of having the outside. My kids have been playing in the backyard for a long, long time, but imagine turning that back around and you're living in Manhattan in a 450 square foot place. I think we were talking about mental impact of it. I couldn't even imagine spending 3 months in 450 square feet.
Well, I lived in an apartment in DC, 480 square feet, and it looked out on a brown brick wall. And if I was in that situation, it would be nothing but hell. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I went on Twitter and was like, hey, I think that this is going to be a real chance for people that have always viewed the middle as flyover country, as like all of a sudden the luxury of living in New York or having the prestige of living in San Francisco now comes at the very high price that if we decide as a society that we're going to quarantine in our houses, now you get to be all alone in your little box. Whereas there is so much space in a place like St. Louis where, it almost seems like there's no end to the amount of space.
Right. And it used to be a thing when you said, well, you know what? I want to go to New York or Chicago because, there's great restaurants, there's great nightlife, there's art, right? But you look at it now and you look at St. Louis and you can say the same thing. I mean, we have some of the best restaurants in the country. Every time James Beard comes around, St. Louis Place is on there, right? And you can probably get into that place faster than you can get it into New York, right? Our culture over here is amazing. We have great artists here, and then on top of that, you have this sprawling, acres and acres of land that you can live without having to be on top of each other, and the quality of life is just great. So I think people are going to start realizing that, and you're going to see people. We were talking about about the office space. If you look at it in California, the rents are 4 or 5 times higher than they are here in St. Louis. And then on top of that, you're paying absolutely absurd amount of money to live in a small, tiny apartment. Well, people are going to start realizing that's not what this is all about, right? Yes, you have beautiful, coastline, but there's a lot of beautiful places here in Missouri that you can be, and a lot of different things that you can do to be active outside, et cetera, et cetera.
The thing that I really had no concept of so I moved away to the coast. So I wanted to live in California and New York, DC, and I did. I lived in all these places. I did not realize until I moved to St. Louis when my commute, across 15 miles or whatever is 15 minutes.
Right.
And you go back and you visit Washington, D.C. and you realize like every single day you are in a dance with millions of other people who all have their own intentions, who all have their own desires, and that has nothing to do with you. No. And so you don't have a community feature. You are just an anonymous, thing getting in other people's way, and they're getting in your way. And all of this time that you have to give over just for things like commutes, once you get out of it, none of it makes any sense why you would be in it in the first place. Right. How much money are you willing to make in order to have a drive where you sit for 2 hours?
Well, on top of that, imagine the stress of it too. It's not that easy driving in some of those big cities. I know, you wouldn't catch me dead driving in New York. I would much rather sit in somebody else's car, right? It would just be horrible, right? And so over here, you take it for granted. You get into your car, you turn on your music, and next thing you know, you're cruising down there is some places where we have some jams, but nothing.
So Dan, if you got people that are coming to you, I mean, the thing that's interesting about you in particular, real estate agents in general, is that a lot of people that are risk takers come to you, particularly in a moment like this. There's a whole bunch of people sheltering in their houses. You got some high risk takers. What is the risk of, say, buying an apartment complex right now and the government says you don't have to pay your rent anymore. Is that a real risk right now?
So, and I'm gonna speak from my own experience, because we are owners of real estate. Also, we have currently we own about 1.6 million square feet here in St. Louis, and so from my perspective, we're buyers in this market, right? Even though you have that risk of not receiving the rent, we believe, or I believe, that will come back, right? People are going to start paying rent. April and May on our portfolio alone, we've collected about 92%, and that's office and industrial. If you look at across the country, all the REITs are trending about the same. On an office side, industrial side, the collection is about 92, 93%. On multifamily is about 90%. On retail, like I said, that's really where people got hit. It's right around 40s on collection. So
wait. So the other ones are trending 90, and then you go down to 40 in the real estate?
That's
go a bad
to
omen.
About 40% on retail side,
Wow.
That is like I said, you have restaurants, you have mom and pop retail shops, you have boutiques. None of those people were able to afford paying rent. And I think that's where the change comes along, is how are we going to shop in the future, what the retail is going to look like, and then how we're going to work in the future, and then how we're going to receive goods in the future, right? I think that's a big shift. So going back to it, would I buy? Yes, we're buyers in this market, even though we don't, even though there's certain rent collection issues right now. Because yes, people are going to pay in the future, but what are they going to pay for, right? So you look at it, are people going to pay for, let's look at the office space. Are people going to pay for a white, stark box that I can put 400 cubicles in, and that's it, right? No, right? Office space is going to become more, about experience, right? If you're going to have people in the office, you're going to want those people to have experiences, like you were talking about jobs.
Wow.
They're going to have to hit each other. They're going to have collaboration. We're going to talk a lot more in the future about healthy buildings, right? People are going to want windows. People are going to want lights. People are going to want healthy working conditions. They're going to want a lot more fresh air going into the building.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. When you think about lights, right? Like commercial real estate, there are very, very few windows you can ever open up because it's too big of a liability, right? But now all of a sudden, if you have a building with windows in it that you can open, the value of that just went way up.
Well, and your mechanical systems, if you can pump in more fresh air through your mechanical systems, so the biggest thing that is proved about this coronavirus is that fresh air it's really an enemy, right? So what the doctors say, go out, get some fresh air, right? If you're in a building, pump as much fresh air into the building as you can. So in some of our buildings that we own and manage, we've started pumping in a lot more air. Replace the filters. We're using different type of filters that we replace that catch, a lot more bacteria than just a typical filter that you would use in your house or whatever. So certain things like that, is really where you look at the future of real estate. It's going to have to be healthy real estate, right? Because people are going to request that and they're going to value that. If you just have a box where you're trying to put people in, it's not going to work as well, right? There's not going to be just that. You look at it back in the day, and you look at what was the relationship between a landlord and a tenant. So a landlord says, tenant, pay me my rent, and I'll give you the space. And tenant said, here's my rent, leave me alone, right? Future is not going to be like that, right? Future is going to be a lot more collaborative between the landlord and a tenant. they're going to touch points on a lot more avenues than just here's your space. It's going to start looking a lot more like a hotel where you go to work than it's going to look like just a box with cubicles and computers, right?
So, do you perceive it'll be a lot more like Uber style offices where you can just kind of rent or come in and out, or will people want their own secure place where they can keep their own stuff and know how it's being treated?
Well, so that's a good question there, because we were trending back to, you think about WeWork, right? We were trending to a place where you can, have a bench somewhere and you can, register that bench to you, 3 days a week or something like that, right? And you're going to see a lot more going back to the private offices than you did before. You're going to see a lot more going to your private stuff than you did before, because imagine I'm using the same desk as you're using, as 15 other people are using while I'm not using it or you're not using it. I mean, imagine the germs, and people are not going to take that lightly anymore, right? You're going to either have to have somebody, every time somebody leaves, disinfect that space very, very thoroughly. Or you're going to, just decide to have a dedicated space for somebody, right? So really going back to the whole thing about the office space, if you look at it, I think people are focusing on the wrong thing. There was a Jones Lang LaSalle did this, and you can do it in any different shape or form. In St. Louis here, I would say you can do it at a lesser scale. So 2, 20, 200, right? 2 is utilities that you pay, $2 that you're paying a square foot per utilities. 20 is $20 a square foot that you're paying for your office space, right? And 200 is what you're paying for people. Why are people worried about 2 and 20 when really the biggest cost of their business is the 200? And really what you should be spending the most money on is that 200. You want to make sure that 200 is productive. You want to make sure that 200 is healthy. You want to make sure that 200 is knowledgeable. Don't think about the office space, really. Think about how do you make that 200 productive, because that's where you make money.
Well, and that goes straight to your point on the art of how you put together people in a room is what matters there, because then you're adding to the 200 and not just the cost of the office space. That's it.
If you look at it, the office space and utilities here in Midwest are cheap, right? Focus on people, right? That's a big thing. I mean, I think companies are starting to figure that out, and I think it's going to be more so even in the future. So when you're talking, what does St. Louis do? I think St. Louis needs to continue to stay on a track of attracting these companies, that want to invest into that 200, that want to invest into their employees, because this is a perfect place to do that, right? You have cheap real estate, and you can invest more into the people. So
yeah, I mean, I would make the case of, hey, just like we did before, St. Louis is a great place to be, blah, 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 for all of our reasons. I love the art museum. I think it's a national treasure that people should travel from all over the world to come to this museum. Yeah. But if you were in the role of government, or you were advising the St. Louis, either city or county government, what are rule changes that they could make, or what are situations that they could create that would make it much easier for these businesses that are going to reshore manufacturing from other places, or people want to get out of their dense cities? How do you make this the place that people want to come to as they're moving?
Business friendly. That's number one. You look at the places that have blown up over the last decade, right? You look at Nashville, you look at Austin. What do those people have, or what do those cities have that we don't have? Is that climate of being business friendly. I love St. Louis, but again, as somebody who deals with real estate and somebody who has to bring people in, we have to deal with all kinds of municipalities here, right? Then we have to deal with the counties. Then we have to deal with all kinds of regulations. So think about it. If you're going to Nashville, you know, you only have to deal with one, right? You don't have to deal with, I can't even keep track. Maybe you know how many municipalities here we have.
A lot, yeah.
You know, but again, you don't want to have a huge red tape to be able to establish business here in St. Louis, open up an office, and go hire a bunch of people, right? So I think that's number one thing. I think we were on a right trajectory with, you know, trying to combine the St. Louis city and the county. I know that's a huge, huge task, and I know it's highly political, and that's why some people don't even want to touch it. But again, in order to see better, stronger St. Louis, I think you're going to have to do something like that.
Yeah, if I were a politician right now, I would be doing everything I could to say, we are going to make it so if people are going to change their lives, they've made a giant decision that we want it to be easy to buy houses here. We want it to be easy to transfer commercial property. We want getting a business license. You know, I heard the other day from a guy in Illinois who said right now, if you wanted to start an LLC in the state of Illinois, there's no one taking those applications and saying, yes, we approve. This is no good. Like during the crisis, what you want is people to be able to make businesses. And, you know, if you're not going to give them the right to do it legally, they'll just do it illegally.
Right. Yeah, you just have to. I mean, people are, if you think about people, they're so resilient, right? You know, you think about even these hard times, people are starting businesses. I would say personally, these hard times are the best time to start businesses. And if you look at it through the history, the hard times is when the innovation is the highest. The hard times is when some of the best companies are formed and started. So if you take that away, like you were saying, if you can't even incorporate, I mean, what's the point, right? So yeah, I mean, make it, you know, you look at it from your personal life too. Why do you do certain things that you do? Because it's easy, you know. Why do you order an Uber? Because it's easy, you know. You don't have to take a phone, call somebody, that somebody puts you on a phone call, on a hold. They have to find where the net cab is. Then they have to say, well, where are you going? How are you going to pay? The reason why Uber is because it's so easy to order an Uber and get it to your wherever you need to go, right? Same thing with business. If you can streamline how businesses come to your community and what they do in your community, it game over, right? So
yeah, I mean, like if you can make it so people don't, I mean, I would move if it meant that you could go to a place and they made business doing so much easier. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you move? Like, why wouldn't you go to the place where the government takes the least amount from you? It's the easiest to work with. Like they're basically there to facilitate a transaction, you know, what little they need to be a part of it. I wonder, are there cities right now? Do you know anybody gearing up to make big changes during this virus?
You know, there's a lot of progressive cities out there. And, you know, going back to it, one thing that people don't think about, and for some reason governments don't think about, just like people don't think about it. You know, in St. Louis, for example, we have this tax, 1% head tax, right? And the other day I was watching on TV and, you know, they were arguing, well, if you are not able to work in the city of St. Louis, are you still, you know, are you still having to pay that? Yeah. Are you still having to pay that tax, right? You know, and they were going back and forth, and there's going to be lawsuits right now. To me, that's counterproductive, 100%, right? Think about it. Just like any business, if you can scale your business, you can make more money. If you can scale your cities or your counties, you can make more money. But you're going to have to cut somewhere in order to do that. You can't say, I'm going to scale it, but I'm going to charge all kinds of taxes on everything, right? That doesn't work, right? Because you can't scale it that way. So I think the cities that are going to do it the best is they're going to figure out that just like a business that does it the best, you know, Amazon, for example, they're perfect reason, you know, perfect case study for even for governments to look at. How do you scale a business? I mean, they were making tiny little profit margins on selling you and shipping you, you know, needles for free, right? So you sit down at home and you say, okay, I'm going to buy a needle, and Amazon sends you a needle through Prime and you don't pay for shipping. Well, they make a tiny little profit, but again, you multiply that, and it's the same thing that you have to look at on a government perspective. They need to act more like business. How do we attract more and more businesses to St. Louis in order to scale our government, our county, our everything? So,
yeah, and it seems like now, right now is the time, because, a month into coronavirus, you had the problem that people still didn't know what was going to happen. And we still don't know what's going to happen, but we have a lot better signal that we're going to come out of it. We're going to have business again. People are going to return to work. So now is the time to be pulling anything out of the way that would make it possible for people to move here and start businesses.
And you'll see this. You will see this too. This is the time that good businesses prosper, right? This is the time that leadership goes right on top. If you have a leader in your business and that leader is ready to lead, they're coming right on top, right? And that should be the same way with the government. If you have good leadership, this is the time when it comes on top, right? This is the time that maybe leadership makes unconventional decisions. This is the time maybe where you pivot a little bit, right? I want to see that from St. Louis County and from St. Louis City. I have not seen it yet, but I do want to see it. I want to see that pivot where the leadership says, you know what, this is a great opportunity for our county, for our city to do something. Let's do something that's maybe crazy, maybe unconventional, but it'll put us out there and we'll do something with it, right? We have so many talented people in the city and in the county, I see a lot, there's a lot of talk about Dorsey and Square and, here's a great opportunity. You have great minds here in St. Louis that love St. Louis.
So for anybody that doesn't know, what Dan is saying is that Jack Dorsey is actually a St. Louis native. So and not only did he start Twitter, but he also started Square along with a guy named Jim McKelvey, who's here in St. Louis. And they've been trying to reshore some jobs from the coast into the Midwest, because what you end up finding out is while all the coders are out in the West Coast, you're paying them more, but their cost of living is more. So you can cancel that out and actually give an employee a way better quality of life by bringing coders here. So they were doing that before coronavirus, and I hope that afterwards we just scale it infinitely.
And again, give those two guys, give them some buy-in into the government here, right? Let them help, because obviously they're the ones. They've started so many successful businesses. They know how to do it. They can help St. Louis be even a better city, right? There's so many things that we can do as a city or as a county to be much better. But I think we need to bring in the brightest minds to help us do it. We're not going to do it just through politics, period. So
you're now back in the office. You guys are running A/B shifts. The business market seems to be plugging along. You're making sales right now.
The sales are going on. The leasing market has cooled off a bit. We are seeing a resurgence in the leasing market, though. People are starting to get out of their homes. People are starting to look for the office. The offices that we're seeing that are trading again is where people want to create that next level environment for their employees, right? And so, this recession is going to be different than 2008. I think we're going to see a much, much faster bounce back.
Really? You think so?
I think so. See, what's going on is the problem that we had in real estate in 2008, 9, 10, it was fiscally caused problems, right? You had people creating these CMBS tranches. There was financial engineering. Everybody was greedy. We got to that point by doing bad, right? This recession, is not as bad. Now, I'm not saying that there were not people out there doing the same thing prior to it, right? There was bad actors in this recession. You'll see them fail here shortly, and there'll be people on the sidelines ready to pick it up. But there's still a ton of companies out there with really good balance sheets. If you look at around the country on the residential side, you can already see that the residential real estate is bouncing back. People are still looking to buy houses.
That's the craziest thing of all. The neighborhood where I'm at, I think housing prices have gone up something like 10, 15% just in the last 2 weeks. It was crazy how much I have some friends looking for houses, and I was like, well, are you worried about putting your house up on the market? Like, how many people? And they're like, no, as soon as we even started looking at sites for listing our house, we got so many ads driven towards it. Anyway, it seems like residential in the suburbs is doing really, really well.
It is doing well, and then people, again, going back to it, you want to find a home that you're going to be comfortable if you're stuck in quarantine, So, people are going to probably look for more pools. People are going to look for, outdoor nice, larger yards, yada, yada, yada. But going back to the commercial side, there's so much money on the sidelines right now looking for distress. I don't think that there's going to be as much distress as everybody wants, right? Because I don't think it's going to last as long as it lasted last time.
That's really hopeful, man.
I think the banks are in a better position. I think the businesses are in a better position. There's a lot of liquidity on the sideline. This government, this government program that that they're coming out with, and pumping the money into the economy. I think that's been very helpful. I think it's going to continue to help people. So I think we've done a lot more better things this time around than we did last time around. The government acted very fast. Even thinking about it, this Paycheck Protection Program, it came out fast, even though a lot of banks, a lot of SBA lenders didn't know what the heck they were doing. They did it fast. They funded fast, right?
That was nothing short of genius. Whether or not that was the right thing to do or put that much money into the economy, you and I both know Travis Liebig with St. Louis Bank. That was absolutely mind-boggling how the government used the private sector to deliver those PPP. It's unbelievable. There's no way you could have gotten a government organization to have delivered the money that fast.
Right. And that's the thing. That was a great move on somebody's part to use the private sector to send this thing out. And I think banks were incentivized to do it, which made it even better, because banks, they were worried about when this thing hit, everybody was worried about their revenues, right? Well, this was something that propped up banks' revenues too, because they were able to issue loans that they knew that the government is going to back up or, buy them right along.
Well, Travis said, I don't know if he wants me talking about what he tells me when we're not on camera, but what he said, which I thought was really interesting, because of the way that PPP rolled out, a lot of the money came through community banks, and people that had normally just been I bank with the first bank that I walked in the door with. He said, now we have a chance to start relationships for people to wake up and think about what is a bank? It's not just the place where I cash my check and store my money. It's got all these relationships. I think that one of the biggest things that will come out of that PPP program is people will have a very different relationship with their bank because it's going to matter if you can get somebody on the phone now.
Well, and this is a great commercial for banks like Travis's and the community banks. Us personally as a business, we were not doing business with big banks. And that stemmed out of the last recession. When you're looking for a bank, you got to look at a bank where you have a personal relationship. You know the person behind the counter. You know the person who is running the bank. Because when tough time comes around, that is the people that are going to help you out. It is not going to be a call center in who knows where, right? So what we were privy through this process of the PPP is that a lot of businesses that were banking with larger banking institutions, they could not get their money fast enough. And people who are banking with the local small community banks, they got them like, a month before, right? So yes, I think, and I'm hoping that this is going to happen, not just with community banks, but it's going to happen, like we were talking earlier, with the whole local economy, that it comes back to the local, to the people that you know. And then what you're really doing is you're really affecting everybody in this little microcosm, right? I'm helping you, you're helping me. I think everybody's livelihood is much better that way, right? So
Dan, you are considered among our group of friends one of the premier entrepreneurs, a guy that came from another country and made his way. If you're thinking about a young gun, 20, 21 years old, they've got all sorts of ambition, they've got no money, but they want to find a way to get into this thing called real estate, what would be the first couple of steps on that path that somebody could take?
Yeah, my biggest thing, and this is going to go around and around, but my biggest thing is hard work. You can be as talented as you want to. You can be smart as you want to, right? But again, nothing beats hard work. I came here to the United States because of basketball, and so I've been living my best life watching the Last Dance on ESPN. And you look at Michael Jordan, there was a guy that was very much, he had predisposition physically, right? He had good muscles and everything else to play basketball. But what set him apart from everybody else is how hard he worked, right? I mean, when people were walking off the court, wanting to go, relax or go party, he was going back to the gym and pushing people back to the gym. Same thing with entrepreneurship. Same thing with work. You got to put in the time. You got to put in the work. In business and anything in life, you got to read. I go through a month. I mean, my wife is hating me because if you look at my nightstand and if you look at my office, there's books everywhere. There's magazines everywhere. I'm just a constant consumer of information, because what does that do? That helps you be better and helps you advance and helps you see the differences that other people that don't read don't see, right? So you constantly have to be consuming information, and especially in real estate, because if you're like me, I came here to the United States with nothing really. I came to play basketball, right? And then you look at it. Well, how do you beat somebody who's local in this game called real estate? It's not by kind of cocooning yourself and using your strings with people that et cetera, because you don't know anybody, right? You're a foreigner in the United States. So how do you do that? You gotta be smart. You gotta work hard. You gotta work smart. You gotta find these niches where people don't want to. So what do we do on Bamboo Equity Partners side? We invest in real estate that's between $1 and $10 million in purchase price, right? Why do we do that? We do that because big funds don't want to do that, because it's the same amount of effort to close on a $50 million deal as it is on a $5 million deal. So, what the big funds do is they raise, $500 million. They go buy, $1.5 billion of real estate, and, they make a ton of money. But in the process of that, right, they're not making the prudent decisions. What we do is we're buying much smaller real estate. We do much smaller funds, and we're very successful at it because of that. You can't say that you're going to buy. Now, there's one difference. Blackstone, right? They've got it covered. They raise billions of dollars, and they're very successful with that. But my feeling is the more money you raise and the more money you put out there, it's harder to be successful, because you forget what you're in the business for. you start becoming a financial engineer instead of starting to being a real estate owner and developer and whatever. So again, focus on niches that other people don't want to focus on because it requires hard work. So
I love it. That's a great answer. And as you look around at the world, just to kind of round out the interview, what do you think the world's going to look like in 2 weeks?
2 weeks, same as it does today. It's hard to break habits. It's very hard to get people to move away from their habits that they formed. And now we literally formed some habits. We were in this quarantine for 3 months now. You create a habit by doing so. So what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks? It's not going to change as much. What's going to happen in the next 2 years? I believe that it's going to change a lot because we're going to be a lot smarter from this experience. I don't believe we're going to get caught like we did get caught this time around with a virus. Now, maybe there's something out there that we're going to get caught. Maybe it's going to be a natural disaster. A lot of people are talking about, global warming, and is this, is this really happening because of we're not taking care of our, habitat, right? And so, is that going to change because of this? Probably not as much, but maybe if there's another disaster or a hurricane or earthquake, well, maybe then people are going to start thinking about that. So I think as humans, we're kind of very narrow-minded, and we go in the direction that we are pointed to. So in these last 3 months, we were pointed in a direction. We're going to fight that direction, but then later on, we're going to find something else. So.
Hey, I mean, it's interesting to me because everybody comes on, I ask them this question, and I would say 90% of people say there'll be no difference in 2 weeks. And it's interesting because if you look back to 2 weeks ago, I'm not so sure I could point out that much of a difference. So I don't think people are wrong, but there are giant moves happening, right? And they're probably these tiny little changes that are happening that 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now end up being this big thing, but it's imperceptible as far as I can tell.
Well, it's just like anything in life. You got to build small steps, right? Nobody, went from here to, over there.
Not stably anyway. If you do.
Not stably, right. Yeah. And so you build small steps. What are we doing currently in our business is we're building small steps in this bad time, right? I mean, this is considered a bad time for real estate, right? But what can you do in a bad time? You can build small steps to improve yourself. You can build small steps to maybe affect the change 2 years down the road, right? And that's all you can do. You really shouldn't be doing anything crazier than that. As long as you're doing that, I think you're going to be successful. Make a lot of small steps and fail, right?
Amen. But if you fail on a small step,
a small step, it's not a big deal, right?
Right.
If you fail on a big step, well, then it might take you some time to get back on your feet, right? So,
Dan, I am so grateful you were willing to hop on. I've been dying to have a conversation about commercial real estate, but I wanted to get far enough through this thing that we could have some answers, and you delivered. So, Dan, if people wanted to get a hold of you, find out more about your real estate company, your fund, how could they do that?
So the two best ways is our website. If you go to bambooequity.com, and also on our sister company, Intellica Commercial Real Estate. You can Google that, or you can just put it
I'll put it in the browser.
Yeah.
Sure.
And again, you'll find out a lot more in there. You'll find out, some of our pieces of literature out there that are out there about the future of real estate, future of office space, et cetera. And so kind of spend some time through our websites and see what's in there, because there's some good pieces of information there. So,
well, thank you so much for stopping by. It was great chatting with you, Dan.
Thank you. Appreciate you, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.